Welcome back to the KDPG Sunday edition. This morning we are pleased to have with us Jardis Greydanis, the director of the award-winning film about Dr. Thomas Starzl titled Burden of Genius. We're also, though, moving on from Dr. Starzl to plans for another movie. This one is about Dr. Jonas Salk, who, with his team of researchers here in Pittsburgh, developed the polio vaccine. This is how Dr. Salk described to KDKA's Marlon Singleton in 1980 the impact that polio had before the vaccine.
Polio was the most feared disease, that which terrified everyone every summer. Now, just put yourself in the place of anyone who had that periodic fear about which they could do nothing. It disrupted people's lives for months. Now, that's over and above the effect that it had upon the victims. But the country was in terror.
Once again, we have with us the director of not only Burden of Genius, but now perhaps a new movie about Dr. Salk, and that is Jardis Greydanis. Jardis, why did you want to do one now on Dr. Salk?
Well, a few years ago, we did a documentary about Dr. Salk, about the 6 years that he spent here in Pittsburgh, called A Shot Felt Around the World. And we interviewed a lot of people who had worked with him, some of the patients, some of the people who volunteered to be tested for the vaccine, and his own two sons as well. So it was a great experience. It took a couple of years to get it made, but the film was finished and it's aired on the BBC and on Smithsonian and a number of other channels, and it's actually going to be re-released again. But Jonas Salk, the man, was still very much a mystery to me in many ways. And so I thought, I thought that was kind of affirmation that it was a compelling character to write a narrative feature.
The Shot was really more of a documentary. You're looking now to really do almost a regular movie about Jonas Salk then.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, movies like The Imitation Game and The Theory of Everything and Hidden Figures, and a while back, A Beautiful Mind. Science-themed, character-driven movies. Kind of bolster my belief that there is an audience out there for that, and that can, attract named talent.
Now, you have put together a concept idea. I'm not quite sure what this clip is, what you call this, but...
proof of concept.
Proof of concept. We're going to play that. So this is perhaps what the movie might look like.
Dr. Salk, the whiz kid of the University of Michigan. What is your next field of research?
Viruses still intrigue me. Measles, common cold, maybe polio.
Terrible, isn't it? Comes every summer. We get like 15 admissions a day.
His peers will underestimate him.
What's that?
We're culturing the virus. We're now able to grow it in a way that is safe enough and wonderful enough.
You're working on a vaccine?
Indeed, he was working on a vaccine with a team of researchers here at the University of Pittsburgh, and it did take, as you say, several years to come up with this. As Starzl, Dr. Salk is also a complicated individual as well.
Absolutely. They both got to their objective in different ways. I think Salk was very much. He grew up in the shadow of a very dominant mother, and his mother, as a child, his mother used to make him pray that he could do something good for humanity. Imagine the pressure. So Dr. Salk very much avoided conflict, and so then the big question becomes, and this is part of the mystery of Salk, is how does he get what he wants? I mean, beneath his quiet reserve, he had tremendous willpower. He was able to hammer out an infrastructure to get his vaccine done. He could run dozens of experiments at the same time, whereas his competitors, the other scientists, were working on a much smaller scale. And he had tremendous courage. When Walter Winchell, the famous gossip columnist, did a story on the Salk vaccine and was creating fear about the safety of the vaccine, Dr. Salk went on CBS radio to defend his vaccine. Not only that, he inoculated himself with his experimental vaccine, his wife, and his 3 sons.
Well, what would Salk think? What would Salk say or do about this rising tide of anti-vaccine sentiment that we see today. I mean, there's a mumps outbreak at Temple. There's been a measles outbreak in a part of New York City. What would he say and do about that?
I think he would be very upset. And I think he would be, speaking out about it. I mean, I think one of the things that he said was, vaccines in a way have become a victim of their own success because people do not remember what it was like, as Dr. Salk was saying in the clip. People do not remember what that looked like, And of course, polio is such a visual disease. It's about little children in leg braces and wheelchairs and iron lungs, and young parents haven't seen that, they think they can not vaccinate their kids. Yeah, I think it would be very upsetting to him because it just killed him to see people suffer,
Yeah, on that line, in that interview that Marlon Singleton did with him back in 1980, there was a measles outbreak at that time, and also in the Amish community, there was an outbreak of polio in one little community. And she asked him about that, and he said it goes back to education. People have to understand that their lives and the lives of others rest on them to be able to stop it, and that would, of course, be vaccination.
Absolutely, and in a way it is ironic because it's some of the most progressive thinking people on the West Coast, for example, who are against vaccinating their kids. So it's an ironic thing.
You say there's this market, you believe, for movies about science. What drives that? I mean, what are people hungering for that they take a shine to movies like that?
Well, I think it's a story of an incredible success, first of all, and it's a true story. It's a very inspirational thing. I think it is good that it's also, it draws attention to the vaccine controversy, and then to inspire young students to, a whole new generation of young scientists, I think, in that way as well. It's an amazing inspirational story, I think, with a happy ending. How often does that happen?
A lot of, though, the movies that you guys were just speaking of here, the main character comes off, you leave the theater thinking, boy, wasn't he such a wonderful person and that sort of thing. That's not always the case with Dr. Salk, because he was criticized here for not sharing the accomplishments with his other team of researchers.
Absolutely, yeah. And there were, I think there were a number of missteps that he took. But, when you put it into context, we can't even estimate how many children and people this has saved from crippling or death, or the fear of parents. So if you put it into that kind of context, I think Salk realized that he had made that mistake by not crediting his people in the lab, and he tried to, make up for that later, I believe. And I believe also his children, Peter Salk,
yes,
will always bring that up. I think it might be a little bit of a burden that he's carrying.
Well, he didn't really credit his fellow researchers, but he didn't seek like a patent for the vaccine or anything like that either, because he wanted it distributed as widely as possible. Is that not correct?
Yeah, that's right. And he made a famous, he said the famous thing, you can't patent the sun. He said that on Edward R.
Murrow?
Yeah, Murrow, that's right. This is science's gift, to the world.
So where are you along with this project for a movie on Dr. Salk?
Well, as you probably know, character-driven, especially science-themed movie, besides the examples that we've talked about, are kind of an endangered species in Hollywood these days. So I'd really like to bring the movie back here. Of course, I want to be filming it here. I want to rally Pittsburgh around it. And there's a real appetite for it, is what I'm finding. I'm only starting to get out now. I've written the script after many, many drafts, and I had the consultation of both Peter and Jonathan Salk in it. And I think that the script is very, very solid. And so I'm talking to the foundations, I'm talking to people around town, to the corporations. I really think that it could be a film that, my motto keeps on being by Pittsburgh and for Pittsburgh, and then this potential of being able to expand that to really have a national release and internationally.
Okay, so you're looking for the big screen and not necessarily one of the streaming services?
Yeah, those kind of things are usually run, coming further down the line. I mean, of course, every director wants to see their movie on the big screen, but you know, there are so many outlets now. Apple TV, you know, is opening up. Roku, and I'm also targeting, you know, science-based philanthropic organizations for this as well.
So who's your choice to play Salk?
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of people who could be playing him, but I thought about Jake Gyllenhaal. You know, he's a very committed actor, and he really stretches. Every role that he does is something completely different, and it's something that he hasn't done yet. You know, and I think you know, Salk's character, because he was a complicated guy, really could be Oscar bait. You know, every actor wants to play the real person, right? The real FDR, or the real Churchill. You know, so I think it will attract a big star. But there's also, you know, Christian Bale, of course, is terrific. Ryan Gosling. I mean, there's a lot of people who could be playing him.
What's your timetable?
I want to be shooting this in the spring of 2020. So
About a year away then.
Yeah. That's right. That's right. So I will keep on getting up every morning at 5 o'clock and try to think of what can I do now to push this ahead. You know, and it's a big boulder to push up the mountain. There's no doubt about that.
These enterprises are not inexpensive. I mean, maybe you're like Starzl, maybe you're like Salk. You're not going to give up on that, but that is a huge amount of money to put together for one film.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know, I mean, to just give you some context, for example, The Imitation Game, which was also a period piece, you know, set in the 40s, cost $14 million. Now, I think that this could probably be made for about 10, and yeah.
It's a 10. All right, we'll go with 10. All right. Okay. So if you've got $10 million, we'll do it. Well, thank you so much for being with us this morning on the KDPG Sunday edition. And Joe Smidel and I will be back with some final thoughts in just a moment.